At the climax of Aliens, Ripley dons a power loader and battles the alien queen 1v1. She drops the matriarch into an airlock in the cargo bay of the Sulaco and opens it, blowing her out into the vacuum of space. The queen is finally defeated and supposedly sentenced to her fate, drifting through the endless void until she either suffocates, starves, or freezes. But with what we were presented with in Alien Romulus, with the Big Chap from the original movie, we have to ask ourselves, what happened to the alien queen from Aliens? In the beginning of Alien Romulus, we learned that the alien from the first movie was found still alive near the debris of the Nostromo 20 years later by the Weyland Yutani Corporation. It had encased itself in a layer of what looked to be the same material the Xenomorphs use for their hive structures. The alien then entered a dormant state and hibernated for all that time before its protective shell was cut open and it was removed to be studied, in which the Weyland Yutani Corporation by some means were able to clone facehuggers from it and used them to extract the black goo from, in an attempt to create a controllable evolutionary accelerant. However, the Xenomorph awoke and attacked the Weyland Yutani researchers and killed a number of them before itself being shot by security. So, if the alien from the first movie was able to survive after being ejected into space, then could the queen from Aliens also have survived this way? It could be the case, as if a drone has this ability, then surely a queen would as well, right? But, on the other hand, does the queen have the ability to produce hive resin, as it is usually thought that it is the drones like the alien from the first movie that make the resin, so perhaps not. So, if a queen is able to produce hive resin, she certainly would be able to encase herself in it like Big Chap did, but if not, then would she die in space, or would she survive, but be conscious the whole time? What I imagined before Romulus added this ability to the aliens was the queen just flailing around for either seconds if she'd suffocate, minutes if from exposure, days if she'd starve, or even decades if she wouldn't die from any of those. A grim fate, kinda like being buried alive, but the opposite. It doesn't bear thinking about. I think that if we go by my interpretation of the alien lore, that the queen would encase herself like Big Chap did, and she'd float around in hibernation until when or if she's discovered, either by Weyland Yutani, the government, or someone else. Of these three possibilities, I think it would be most likely that the company would have the best chance, as they are the ones with the most knowledge about the Xenomorphs, and they did manage to find the first alien by tracking the Nostromo's position and found it nearby. But there is still a bit of a problem. When the Queen was ejected out the Sulaco, it didn't self-destruct after, but instead began heading back towards Earth, or that station Ripley was at in the beginning of Aliens, wherever it set off from. So if they track the Sulaco, that won't take them to the location of the Queen, so it would be a bit more complicated to find the Queen than the first alien. But if they do find her somehow, can you imagine that? A cocoon like from Romulus, but big enough to hold a queen. What this reminds me of is in Alien vs Predator, when we see the queen in that movie that has been frozen and kept in stasis, but is then revived, it would be similar to that. The queen from Alien vs Predator met a similar fate to the Alien's queen, but instead of being jettisoned into space, she was attached to a big vat and dragged into the depths of the Antarctic Sea. I think she would go into hibernation like how she was frozen when we first saw her. If they did an AVP3 at the time, maybe they could have started the movie with the chain holding her to the ocean floor rusting through and snapping, sending her floating up back to the surface, where she maybe gets found by a boat or something and comes back to life, maybe even some years into the future. I think there are a lot of possibilities they could have used for an AVP3, and I do think it's a shame we didn't get a trilogy of those films back in the day. But apparently another Alien vs Predator may be on the cards, according to some comments suggesting it may be co-directed by both Fede Alvarez and Dan Trachtenberg, the director of Prey. That could end up being good, and I'd like a reboot of the AVP movies, but I think I'd like to see at least one more standalone Alien and Predator movie each first before they begin thinking about crossing them over again. I certainly think we are overdue to see a Queen in a movie again, as it's been 20 years now since AVP, or if you want to get technical, since 2007 when AVPR came out, as the Pred alien was said by the filmmakers to be a young Queen, or what is known as a Praetorian, but since 2004 if we're talking about a normal Queen alien. There were actually 2 occasions where we almost got to see an alien Queen in live action again, in the 2 cancelled movies that unfortunately never saw the light of day. In Alien Awakening, the rumoured 3rd movie in the Prometheus trilogy, in a deleted scene at the end of Alien Covenant, David begins broadcasting a message back to Weyland Yutani, and during it says, "I have my wolf, I have my lambs, but I have one thing left to perfect, that's my queen." Meaning the Xenomorph as his wolf, the ship full of colonists as his lambs, and by his queen, it's hinting there was going to be an alien queen in the next movie. And also in the cancelled Alien 5, which was supposed to be a direct sequel to Aliens, retconning the events of Alien 3 onwards. In the released concept art, there are multiple pieces of artwork depicting a queen alien which looked to be being kept in captivity at some sort of research facility before escaping. Both movies sound like they would have been very interesting and would have delivered on progressing the story of the films forward and introducing new elements to them. I did enjoy Romulus as a film, but it didn't really do much new that we hadn't seen before. It played it safe, but I did like the film overall. So that's it for this one, guys. If you want to hear my thoughts on Alien Romulus compared to all the other Alien movies, you can watch my tier list video I made here, or if you wanted to watch another interesting theory video like this one, I'd recommend my video asking what would have happened if the aliens from the AVP movies survived. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Thank you, and I'll see you next time.